And what I want to say as we are getting ready to go here is that 1401 is the absolute latest technology of the day. And we'll come back and talk a little bit more about technology later, but it is state-of-the-art technology, it is easy to use, and it's very, very cost-effective, as you will see. Now, as I mentioned, today you are using punch cards for all your data processing. And the punch card, of course, is, if you would not mind passing those around. Punch card was invented by Herman Hollerith back in 1890. Here we are. Back in 1890, and the cards have changed a little bit since then, but the technology hasn't. That is, the information that's punched in here is the data that currently runs your company. So you have cards that represent each employee, cards that represent the hours that he or she worked, and when we put those together, we can run a payroll. You have cards that represent your vendors and cards that represent all the money you owe your vendors, and when we put those together, we can run accounts payable. So that's the idea behind the punch cards. And with the punch cards and the information that's in them, we can take the information that's in those cards and put it on the various reports. And I want to show you a report being, that's right, a report being run here on our new printer. And we're having a little bit of bulkiness here. Do you want these two, Pat? Now that's a simple little job that we call the powers of 2. In other words, it started out with 2, then 4, then 8, and just kept doubling it until we ran out of print space. And we'll go back and talk a little bit more about that. Hang there. Thank you very much. But right now I want to talk a little bit more about punch cards, a little bit more of an intro. And for that we need a volunteer. Who, Pat, if you find us a volunteer? We always try to get a volunteer who we can teach the fine art of data entry. Now, if you're going to run your business on punch cards, obviously you have to have a way to get the punches in the cards, get the holes in the cards. And those 3 devices along that side are key punchers, and they are run by operators. Today you have 10 different key punches, all run by operators, entering your data on a day-to-day basis, doing exactly what Pat is showing this young man to do here. Key punches, of course, can produce any of the punches on the card. Therefore, 26 alphabetic characters, 10 numeric characters, and a few special characters. And you have not only the key punches creating the data, but you have a number of different pieces of equipment that process the data in various ways. Okay. And one of the things that you always have to do is, in order to have a meaningful report, is to get it into the right sequence. So now what I'd like to ask Cass to do is show you the IBM sorter. And you had this sorter. The data processing folks know about this, but maybe the rest of you don't. Had this sorter in your shop, and it sorts at 1,000 cards a minute.
Okay, so here's a deck of cards that I want to sort. Here's the cards that just print from here. I'm going to put it in an arbitrary place in here. You've seen this card trick before. Sorting on one column. The card has 80 columns in it, and this machine can sort on one column at a time.
But at 1,000 cards a minute, that's pretty darn fast.
What's happening with the rest of these? But anyway, there's 12 bins here, labeled 0 through 9, and there's also 11 and 12 punch. So I now sorted on this one column, and go through, take them out. If I wanted to sort on a different column, it's like the machine can do that. So one thing that happened here was this one card was put in a bin called the reject bin, and that is the card that had his name on it. So nothing personal, it's not a rejection. The reason it did that is because I was sorting on column 74, and it didn't have a 0 through 11 punch, 12 punch in it. I had a blank, and that's why I was rejected. So this is the part where I took the card out of it. So we're going to use this card in a moment.
Okay, so as I say, you punch the data into cards, sort the cards into the right sequence, and you today use this kind of equipment to process it. You have a calculator so that if you need to multiply and divide, like for payroll, you run the cards through the calculator, and you have a printer, a 402, IBM 402 tabulator printer, and it can add and subtract, and because this can multiply and divide, we can get all the math needed done, and we print reports out. That's how you do it today. This guy reads at about 100 or 150 cards a minute. This guy probably around 50 cards a minute. So, now, that's today. What we want to do is talk about the 1401 because we see that as normal. It certainly is. The technology is the latest in technology. We'll talk about three pieces. The 1401 processing unit. That's this. That's the brains behind the computer. Also, we're going to talk about the 1402 card reader punch. That's this guy. And finally about the 1403 over here. Now, as I said, it's state-of-the-art. IBM made the decision 2 years ago that we were not going to use tubes in anything anymore. We were going to use transistors. So let me show you, pass around a couple of these. We call these SMS cards. The name isn't particularly important. But what it is a manufacturer, that is, these are not built by hand. They're manufactured on the line, so they're very high quality. Card that has, in this case, 3 transistors and a number of resistors and so on. These represent the ability of the computer to do everything it needs to do. There are about 2,000 of these cards in the computer. And you can think of these perhaps as being one's an add, one's a subtract, one's a flip-flop, other doesn't matter. Point is, all the functions, all the logical kinds of functions the computer needs to do are on these cards. They're standardized, very high quality, and of course, transistorized. In addition, we use core memory. That's the latest in memory technology. And we'll trade halfway. What Pat has is 140 positions of core memory. And that's the real thing out of this computer. This is a mock-up so that you can see it a little bit better. Core memory has these little tiny donuts bisected and trisected by wires, so that if I have a part of a current, part of these are magnetic, and if the magnetism is that way, you can think of it as being a 0. If the magnetism is that way, you can think of it being a 1. And the wires that pass through there can flip from a 0 to a 1. And it does that by sending half the current through here, half the current through here, and where they meet, you've got sufficient current to flip them. Anyway, that's core memory. It's the latest, the state-of-the-art technology. Let me just trade you so that some of these folks can see this. As I say, this little guy here is 140 positions of core memory. So there's 600 or 700 little donuts in there, all trisected by wires. So that's the state-of-the-art for memory, and that, of course, is what we use on the 1401. The amount of memory I can get on the 1401 ranges from 1,400 characters in memory to 16,000 characters. And yes, I can write a meaningful program in only 1,400 characters. Part of the reason for that is that this is a variable word length and a decimal machine. Variable word length. What variable word length means, kind of like the car. If I have, if you have the ABC wholesale company, you have a 5-digit employee number. So we use 5 columns for that. We don't use 10 or 20 or 30. You do have 20-digit name fields, so we use 20 columns for that. So the amount of data that we use for the various pieces of information in your company varies in length. Many computers today treat everything in terms of a big chunk called a word, and it takes a lot of manipulation to use that word. The 1401 uses variable word length, and you can just think of a card as coming into the computer, and if it takes 5 bytes of memory for an employee number and 20 bytes for a employee name, that's exactly what it takes. Secondly, it uses decimal arithmetic. Decimal arithmetic means I'm thinking, as a programmer, as the person making this machine work, I'm thinking in terms of 1 through 10, just like I do normally. Some of the big machines today and previous computers had been binary, and you had to learn the two base numbering system in order to work. Anyway, so this is state-of-the-art, variable length, decimal arithmetic, and that kind of is a brief overview of the 1401. Now I'd like to talk about the 1402, and the 1403 rather, and maybe we could do big print then. The 1403 is a state-of-the-art printer, and as I mentioned before, your current printing device prints at about 100 or 150 lines a minute. This prints at 600 lines a minute. And in some specialized applications, we can even get a special chain. This is 1403 going again. Ted, you want to tell me a little bit more about 1403? Or? Good.
So the 1403 is a legendary printer. It uses something called a chain. This is a print chain that goes around at 90 characters a second. These little raised type, that are the letters. There's actually 5 sets of them around the train. And it goes in the so in the printer, the chain is right here. Behind the paper are 132 columns worth of print, fixed font, right? And behind each position is a little thing that comes out at the proper time. It's called a hammer. It basically pushes the paper out. And in front is a ribbon, like a ribbon on a typewriter, old school kind of stuff like that. And behind here is the